Actually going to be chatting with Maurisa Gibson-Bailey, who's an exercise physiologist and sports scientist. Today, we'd like to go a little bit further into the training for sport as athletes and coaches gradually get back into what we call normal training. Maurisa, are you there?
Hi, good morning, Carrie.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us again.
Good morning, Maurisa.
Always a pleasure. So, how would a coach know that an athlete is in the state of overtraining?
Right. First of all, what is overtraining? In order to know if you're in overtraining, actually, it is the long-term excessive frequency, volume, and intensity. You know, the FIT principle, where they manipulate that long-term excessive inactivation of that, resulting in prolonged fatigue and decreased performance. So two things, there's prolonged fatigue and there's decreased performance. Now, if the coach, remember we spoke about proper planning, we spoke about monitoring,
right?
We talk about monitoring, right? So if the coach actually engages in proper planning, which is periodization, right, that minimizes the overtraining syndrome, right? So remember if we perform the analysis of the athlete, perform the analysis of the sport, that gives the coach an idea of how to go ahead planning carefully for that individual athlete and in the end, the entire team. So how do we know that if the athlete is overtraining? You have to monitor. And when you monitor, there are going to be signs and symptoms. Clearly, if you plan properly, you're going to minimize the incidences of overtraining. So what are the symptoms? You have mood disturbances. You have heart rate, which is higher than usual. You may have loss of appetite. Now, these things could be attributed to other stuff, but in order to quantify, you really have to monitor your athletes. And in monitoring your athlete, you definitely have to plan properly.
Right. And as we're speaking about overtraining, what are some of the cons of overtraining? What are some of the things that are really, really bad about overtraining?
Sorry, say that again, Carrie?
What are some of the adverse effects of overtraining?
I'm not hearing you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
I'm hearing you now.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I was just asking, what are some of the adverse effects of overtraining?
The adverse effects of overtraining?
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, definitely you would not be able to have the gains on strength and power, which is what you would usually use that physiological state before overtraining, which is overreaching. Right? When you consistently engage in overreaching, which is really the short-term excessive use of frequency, volume, and intensity, then you get into the position where you're not being able to adapt properly to your training objective. That is one of the major adverse effects of overtraining.
Right.
One, you are not able to perform properly. So therefore, in terms of those who would like to peak for a particular competition, then you will not be able to get that performance that you would have actually planned for in the beginning. So again, other adverse conditions would be like levels of tension,
right,
depression, anger, fatigue, confusion, anxiety, impaired concentration. All of these things affect the end result, which is the performance.
Right. So, that tendency to overreach could end up in overtraining and then trigger all these adverse effects. What are some of these strategies, though, to help determine the state of overtraining?
Right. You see, this is part of monitoring. You have to record your heart rate. That's one. You buy a heart rate monitor. Keep training log. Athletes complain about this, but you have to do that. It's as if both from the coach and the athlete perspective, you have to monitor what you're doing. Remember, coaches need to understand as well that you are actually manipulating the physiological variables. You're manipulating how your heart, your respiratory system, your circulatory system functions. You have to monitor that. You cannot subjectively, from the outside, assume. You have to objectively monitor in order so that you know when you're getting into a state of overtraining, because this ultimately affects your performance. You use a hand grip dynamometer, which is a good indicator of your central nervous system fatigue. We know about mental fatigue. Even if you're not in sport, you know about being mentally fatigued. You can't go to work, you feel depressed, you're irritable, right? The same applies. You use a heart rate variability monitor, right? There are different brands. You have to know what is your gold standard that you would want to use. How do these devices help, right? It confirms the internal load, which is what we're talking about. Internal load, meaning that that residual fatigue from previous training sessions, you would want to monitor that so that guides and adjusts your training program for the next session.
Right.
Right?
And if someone, they happen to overtrain, what are some of the recovery strategies that the coaches and the athletes can use?
I like that question because it's not just easy to just list and know recovering strategies, Carrie. Right. You have to be able to use them wisely, understand how to use them wisely during your training, and because it's just as important as how you train effectively. It's okay to know massage, but like I mentioned before in our previous conversations, yourself and Raucus are two different persons.
Right.
Massage may not work for you, Carrie. It may work for Raucus, but you may have a combination of maybe hot and cold therapy with psychological recovery, right? And then you have to be able to be in tune with your training program. Again, we go back to proper training. Again, we must know the objective. We must know what you're training for. What is your objective, right? So apart from massage, hot cold therapy, and these are just basics, basic strategies. You have diet and dietary supplementation. You have passive rest. You have the same psychological recovery. So we have not even, if you're in high performance, then things would be a bit more specific. And then you would have different methods being used because you're just high performance. You're just elite, if you understand.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the phrase there, passive rest. And, I've seen certain trainers and certain, even personal trainers, coaches, athletes as well, they sometimes passive rest and then they sometimes do what is called active rest. For a training program, is active rest something that is recommended, or could that also lead to something within the realm of overtraining?
Well, knowing the difference, active rest is that you would still continue doing whatever activity that is recommended by the coach or that support team that you have that would have recommended that you would do just to be able to get rid of the byproducts of the training session before. Passive rest is like complete rest where you actually, and that depends on the results coming out of your monitoring, because if the coach and the support staff recognizes that this athlete needs to have this particular type of recovery, that is more important than actually training. Do you understand? Because if you don't rest, if you don't recover properly, the adaptation process is going to be hindered. And you don't want that, because you want to be adapted to be able to reach closer to that goal or that performance goal that you would have set earlier on.
All right, that really answers that question succinctly. And with that, I want to thank you, Maurisa Gibson-Bailey, for joining us this morning and always giving us such good information on, training techniques and the various ways in which we can, athletes and coaches can, really engage even in this time where, things are a little bit slowed down and locked down. You're still giving us some very wonderful
those who are in recreational activities. Some of these tips are, yes, it's brief, but it's very applicable to those who are engaged in physical activity that you could implement that. Remember, the baseline is human. You're human.
That's right.
The human body. Yeah?
Yeah, and I myself have learned quite a lot even with my own personal training, which I admit I haven't been doing much of lately because of gyms being closed. But when I do go back out, I can use some of these techniques that you shared with us. All right, Maurisa, thank you so much.